Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Energy Storage News webinar with Clean Horizon, where we'll be diving into the economics of renewable plus storage assets in Europe. I'm Andy Colthorpe, Editor of Energy Storage News and Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Publishing at Solar Media. In addition to Energy Storage News, Solar Media's sites also include PV Tech, which is, as many of you probably know, was the first solar photovoltaic technology site for the global business community when it launched over 15 years ago, and it's still going strong. What you may not know was that, in fact, Energy Storage News began life in 2014 as a sort of side project to PV Tech, because we recognized fairly early what now seems obvious: energy storage and renewables are very close companions. To use the old cliche, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. And energy storage is a very obvious missing link in providing stability to the grid and smoothing generation, in helping utilities and grid operators meet peak demand and compensate for the times when renewable generation is less abundant. Of course, behind every obvious cliche is a much more nuanced and complex reality. Solar PV and battery storage, the main combination our speakers will discuss today, are, despite their complementary applications, very different technologies, and perhaps more significantly, very different market participants. There are direct ways in which storage can make solar projects more financially attractive, such as turning negative pricing events during the daytime into an evening peak opportunity, and cost savings by leveraging a solar grid connection can potentially make storage more financially attractive too. On the other hand, there are market complexities that have to be carefully considered, and this is where today's experts can offer us their guidance. Whichever way this all fits together in the big picture from a market perspective, the reality is that Europe is going to be a major global generator of solar PV over the coming years. The European Union's REPowerEU targets mandate 605 gigawatts of solar by 2030, and countries outside the EU, as well as big corporate purchasers of energy, including data centers, are growing their renewable energy portfolios for environmental and economic reasons. The trade association Solar Power Europe expects EU countries to add 401 gigawatts of new solar PV by 2028 in a medium scenario and 502 gigawatts in a high scenario. Joining us today are our expert speakers, Michael Salomon, Clean Horizon's president, Amira Belazougui, Senior Analyst, and Florian Didier, Energy Storage Analyst, both also with Clean Horizon. Their presentation will be followed by an audience Q&A, and we invite you to put your questions for the speakers in the questions tab that you can see on the right-hand side of your screen. We won't be able to answer all of your questions during the time we have for today's live broadcast, but rest assured that Clean Horizon will be happy to follow up and respond to all of your questions offline in the coming days. Lastly, from me, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available to view again via the on-demand section of the Energy Storage News website. Presentation slides will be sent to registrants and will also be available on demand. And so, with that, and without further ado, it's my great pleasure to hand over to our first speaker, Michael Salomon. Hi, Michael, it's over to you.
Hello, Andy. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Jessica, and thanks, Lois, for helping us set up this discussion. And thanks to all of you for registering and connecting and hopefully participating through the Q&A session after this. Okay, so my name is Michael Salomon. I'm the president of Clean Horizon. So the way we're going to set up the discussion today is I'll be the one doing the annoying propaganda. It'll be very quick. I'll be introducing the company for those of you that don't know us, just so you can understand from what vantage point we're speaking. Florian will be discussing the profitability of hybrid projects as we've modeled through our tool Cosmos. And then he will also take care of section 3 there, where we will try to provide a bit of substance and explanation about those results. And after this, to conclude, Amira will spend a bit of time explaining how the tool that we use, how the Cosmos tool works, and Cosmos is the tool that we're using to actually provide the insights that Florian is going to be first showing and then explaining. Just very quickly on Clean Horizon, for those who don't know us, we're not an energy vendor. We do not own assets. We do not operate assets. We're not a route to market. We don't take stances on, we don't take market positions in any of the energy or ancillary services markets. Rather, we are an advisory firm. We are an advisory firm only working on storage, and both on the market analysis and on technical consulting. So what this means is, as a market advisory firm, market analysis firm, what we do is we track, especially in Europe, all the markets, all the regulations, all the opportunities that storage can pretend to. And we also provide price forecasting of energy and ancillary services prices in about a dozen countries in Europe. And obviously, we also have an effort through the Cosmos tool that we'll be discussing today at using those price forecasts in order to build revenue stacks. Now, that's on the analysis part and on the market analysis part. And we also afterwards act as a sometimes referred to as a technical advisory board or as an owner's engineer. We'd rather call that technical consulting. So this means we accompany our clients in the procurement of energy storage. We also help them negotiate with their route to market. We also look at the sites where they want to deploy storage. We support factory acceptance tests, site acceptance tests, all the way up to the punch list clearance. We're a team of 35 people, and yes, we're very busy, but we're happy to be even busier. Okay, just before we get there, just before I stop the propaganda, I just want to say one last thing is we received a lot of, I would say, feedback and inquiries before the webinar, because we did publish some of the conclusions of this webinar before. It was part of the PR, if you wish. And I think we'll be obviously very much looking forward to your questions. And right now, I will let Florian, the floor to Florian, so he can start with the conclusion and then explain it. So Florian, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Michael. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar where we will be talking about the profitability of hybrid projects and how do PV plus storage projects can operate together, and how we can make it more profitable. So you may have seen one of Michael's last publication on the conclusion that we've had on this topic. So to put a little bit more context of this webinar, we wanted to answer two main questions with this webinar. The first one being hybrid versus standalone projects. What's the most profitable, the most profitable option? And the second question was, when I have a PV already installed, what is the optimal size of battery I can install to improve at most the profitability of my project? So on this graph that you see on the left, which is the conclusion of our analysis, you can see this gradual shift from light green towards dark green. And what does it say? So it shows the delta in IR compared to the PV only project for several sizes of batteries. So you can see on the top from 10% to 100%. For this particular project, we considered a 130 megawatt peak of PV connected to a 100 megawatt grid connection, and the battery thus evolves between 10 megawatts and 100 megawatts. So on the right-hand side of the table, you have the color that is, the result for the standalone BESS project using 100% of the grid connection. And you have the gradual shift from left to right to light green, yellow to dark green. It basically means that, first of all, hybrid projects are more profitable than PV-only projects because you have a surplus in the IR. Again, we only compare the delta in IR and not the absolute IR. And the second conclusion that we have is that hybrid projects are less profitable than standalone projects in the simulations that we have. It also says that with the gradual shift towards dark green, that it is more profitable to opt for large batteries when coupling BESS to PV. And just to be clear, these conclusions were valid for the 4 countries that were under scrutiny, that are France, Spain, Germany, and Sweden. So all in all, to the 2 questions that we wanted to answer, hybrid versus standalone, what is the best option? Well, it is standalone project. And when I have a PV installed, what is the optimal configuration that I can get is the largest battery, occupying 100% of the grid connection. And with the following slides, I will break down the results and explain the rationale between all this. So when we consider hybrid projects, there's what we have called at Clean Horizon the hybridization triangle. Basically, I said that the largest battery allows to improve the profitability of your project the most. Why is that? Well, when you add a larger battery, when you add additional megawatts to your project, you add more revenues to your project. Of course, when you add more storage capacity, you can pre-qualify more on the ancillary services, you can charge more on the markets, you're going to have more revenues. That's simple. Those revenues can help to cover the fixed costs of your projects. So this will able to improve the profitability, but there is a cost to that, of course, the cost of the battery, and it also had a grid connection competition with the PV. So with this, with these parameters, there's an optimal balance that we need to find between adding more storage, which will improve the revenue that we get from the markets, which will help cover the fixed costs, but also improve the grid connection competition with the PV. And the results of our simulation shows that the balance, the parameter balance for PV plus storage projects is located at the largest battery on the grid connection possible. All right, so this slide is to explain like in more visual way why hybrid projects are better, more profitable than PV only projects. Because as Andy said, well, the sun doesn't shine always, and this will make the use of the grid connection for PV only projects suboptimal. Of course, during solar hour, so in our case, for example, with a 130 megawatt peak of PV on a 100 megawatt grid connection, during solar hours, you might have energy curtailment. That is energy that is completely lost, and you're not going to be able to get it anytime, like at another time. And outside those solar hours, there's a huge part of the day where the grid connection is totally empty and not used. So adding a BESS will allow us to get this excess energy coming from the energy curtailment and use the grid connection when the PV does not produce. So that way the BESS can participate in energy and ancillary services markets. So this is the rationale behind why hybrid projects are more profitable than PV only projects. Well, because we use the grid connection in a more optimal way than the PV only project, and the revenues that we get from adding a BESS cover the actual cost of the BESS. So this is one of the conclusions that we wanted to emphasize. The second thing that we wanted to emphasize is the grid connection competition between the battery and the PV. So of course, when the PV produces, it limits the available capacity on the grid connection for the battery. And this unavailability, this competition on the grid connection is even larger when you add more BESS on your system. When the battery does not have full availability on the grid connection, it limits its capacity to its ability to participate in the markets, and especially ancillary services markets, which are in most of European countries the best the best revenue streams that battery storage can get. So yeah, it is quite important to keep in mind that when you add a battery to an existing PV, well, you add the grid connection competition, and the larger battery you're gonna install, the more competition you're gonna have on your grid connection. So this is what makes standalone projects more profitable than hybrid projects, because for standalone projects you don't have this problem of competition on the grid connection, and the battery can operate freely on the markets and use the total capacity available on the grid connection to participate and make offers on ancillary services, which would have not been possible with when the PV produces. So first conclusion was hybrid projects were better than PV alone projects. Now we have the conclusion that standalone projects are more profitable than hybrid projects, and we will dip a little bit more. We'll dig a little bit more into the financial aspect of the simulations. So here we wanted to provide you some numbers on the grid connection competition and what impacts does it have on the marginal revenue when we add more and more batteries on an existing PV project. So on this slide, you have the German example of the additional revenues when we increase the battery on always the same project, 130 megawatt peak of PV, 100 megawatt grid connection, and the battery evolving between 10 megawatt and 100% megawatts. So on this graph on the left, what can we see? So if the base case is the 10 megawatt battery, when we add another 10 megawatt, we gain 9,288 K euros. I'm sorry, this is K euros, keep in mind. And when we add another 10 megawatts to reach 30 megawatts, we gain a little bit less. So it just shows that the marginal revenues when adding more batteries decrease. Of course, because we increase the grid connection competition, so less opportunities for batteries on the market. And this is why we need to find the balance between adding the BESS, adding more capacity on your BESS, and get enough revenues. So even though we increase the grid competition with the PV and the battery, and we decrease the marginal revenues for the battery, upsizing the battery can still be worthwhile if the additional revenue, of course, offsets the cost of the battery. Plus, it contributes to covering part of the project's fixed costs. Remember, it is part of the hybridization triangle. The fixed costs of the project are very important because adding more revenues by adding more battery capacity can help covering those fixed costs. And to go a little bit more in details on the financial characteristics and the economic assumptions that we used for the simulations. So here is almost exhaustive list of what we used as assumptions for running the simulations. So for the best O&M, we've considered 2.5% of the capex. all of these values are either average values that we see in different projects, or values that we get from tenders or RFPs that we've organized this year. So for the BESS 1M, 2.5% of the capex. The insurance costs is at 1,500 euros per megawatt hour per year. The asset management, which is also a fixed cost of the project, is supposed to be 30k euros below 50 megawatts and 50k euros between 50 and 100 megawatts. We assumed an optimizer cost, like a commission for the optimizer, of 8% of the revenues of the battery. The auxiliary consumption is supposed to be 25 megawatt hour per megawatt hour installed per year. The discount rate is 10%. The decommissioning cost is 5% of the capex. We assumed a COD in 2027 for the project, with a battery of 15 years of lifetime, and an average cycling of 1.5 cycle per day. The availability 97%. The DevEx, which is also a fixed cost, important to the project, 500k euros. And as for the PV, so the PV capex is supposed to be 250k euros per megawatt peak. And the grid connection costs, well, also fixed cost for the battery, which is 45k euros per megawatt peak installed of PV. And now, one thing that is very important, of course, is the battery capex. So we've put here 2 different capex for 2-hour and 3-hour. I will get back to the duration of the battery in the next slide. But for the 2-hour battery, for the 2 durations, we always have one variable cost in euros per megawatt and one fixed cost for the BOP costs. For the 2-hour BESS, it's 460k euros per megawatt, plus a fixed BOP cost of 750k euros. For the 3-hour, it's a little bit more on the variable part, with 590k euros per megawatt. This is valid for batteries below 40 megawatts. The capex change a little bit for batteries with higher capacity. So from 40 to 100 megawatts, we considered a decrease on the capex. This is why for a 2-hour BESS, you get 445k euros per megawatt, but an increased fixed BOP cost of 4 million euros. And for the 3-hour BESS, we have a 585k euros per megawatt and a fixed BOP cost of 4 million euros. Those values are, as I said, like average values that we get from the latest tenders and RFPs that we've organized, so that we've received from different suppliers offers for batteries. Okay, so once we have all the inputs, the economic inputs for the simulations, we can go to the results and present you the numbers that we got from running the simulation. So as Michael said at the beginning of the presentation, we used our internally developed optimization tool, Cosmos, and we used it with our semester 1 2025 price forecast for the 4 different countries that were under scrutiny, so France, Spain, Germany, and Sweden. And now you have the numbers for the delta in IRs compared to the PV-only project. So the PV-only project, please bear in mind that this was a full merchant project, 130 megawatt peak on a 100 megawatt grid connection. And so, as Michael presented in his LinkedIn publication, the more battery we add on the grid connection, the more the IR increases. and of course standalone projects. With the results of the simulation shows that standalone projects are more profitable than any size of battery in hybrid projects. One thing that I want to emphasize is the fact that, for example, if you see in Germany and Spain, you have a great increase of IR. So the delta in IR is very big compared to France and Sweden, especially in Spain with a plus 11.7% for the 100% battery. This doesn't necessarily mean that it is better to do hybrid in Spain. In this table, we wanted to like divide every country and consider every country independent from one to another. So you can see that the scale of the color shift is the same for every country. They end up being at the same color for the standalone BESS. It only means that in Spain and Germany, due to very high PV penetration, full merchant PV projects sell their energy at a very low price during solo hours. So the base case with the PV only reference case is already at a very low IR. And of course, when you add battery, you are able to increase a little bit more this IR. But this doesn't necessarily mean that it is better. It is absolutely better to do a hybrid in Spain. It's just that the increase of IR is better because you come from a lower reference case. Yeah, this was the one thing that I wanted to emphasize. And yeah, we come to an end to this presentation of our simulation results. So the two conclusions for the two questions that we wanted to answer is that yes, standalone projects are more profitable than hybrid projects. And what size do I install on my hybrid project? Well, the more batteries you're going to add, the more revenues you're going to get, which will help cover the fixed costs of your project. And even though it has grid connection competition on your project, the revenues available on the markets, especially ancillary services, are enough to make larger batteries more profitable than smaller ones. And now I will let Amira talk about a little bit more details about Cosmos and our price forecasts.
Thank you, Florian, and hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So basically, so far, you've seen the brief introduction of Clean Horizon. Florian has presented the results, so you must be wondering now even more about the tools that we have used in order to conduct these studies. And with that, we will start with the first tool, which is Cosmos, for those who haven't heard about it or doesn't know how it works. So basically, Cosmos is our internally developed tool that helps optimize a BESS, whether it's standalone or a hybrid system, in order to maximize its daily revenues for the whole project duration. So basically, Cosmos will consider multiple parameters in order to maximize the revenues that you can get with your project, just like how a route to market would do, meaning that we do not consider only theoretical revenues. It's not based on perfect foresight, on the contrary. So basically, Cosmos will first consider the economical aspects of your project, meaning the CapEx and the OpEx of the different assets, the storage, the PV, and the wind. It will consider the technical parameters, like the sizing of the whole system, the power, and the duration for the energy of your storage system. And also, since we're talking about hybrid systems, it also considers the grid connection available for your system, since it's very important. especially in the case of hybrid projects. It will also consider the market parameters, such as the prices for each market that is eligible for each system, which is important in order to get the revenue streams of the project. So basically, the tool will help optimize the full system by trying multiple configurations and giving as an output which one is the most profitable, by calculating the cash flows, given the net present value and the IRR of the project, since it considers all the revenue streams that are available for both the BESS system or the PV or wind. In the cases that we've simulated are full merchant project, meaning that the PV or the wind system, the PV system is not under a PPA or any governmental scheme. It's basically full merchant, meaning that it's going to be selling its energy through the wholesale market. And for the cost, so anything you can imagine about the storage system, meaning that the cost for managing the state of charge, it's included in the tool. The grid fees, the energy taxes, and everything related and that we face as a cost when developing a storage system is included in Cosmos. So, which is why we can get the full cash flows at the end in order to get the profitability of each configuration and compare which one is the most profitable. The tool allows also to run sensitivity analysis regarding the technical parameters of the storage system, such as the number of cycles, the degradation curves, and even the efficiency. We're able to implement that as an input and see how it impacts the revenues and the costs of the project. So after running multiple sensitivity analyses, you can compare the results and find what is the most optimum scenario for your project. So how it's going to be working exactly, basically, as I explained, Cosmos will take a set of inputs and then gives us as an output the multiple revenue streams that can be inputted into an Excel business model that will help you get the NPV and IRR for each configuration. So from Clean Horizon side input, we will be implementing any technical feature related to the storage system and make it possible to be adapted to your specific project. For example, the degradation curves and the number of cycles that your project will be allowed to have. The rules regarding ancillary services participation and mainly the sizing rules for each market, such as the secondary or tertiary reserve, or even FCR markets based on each country. Of course, we're able to supply also the forecast of the ancillary services prices in the wholesale markets also. And most importantly, the latest energy storage CapEx and OpEx based on the latest industry trends. As we've already seen, CapEx during the last year have dropped very much compared to 2023 and early 2024. And from your side, it will be anything related to your either existing or the project you're willing to develop, such as the PV or wind production profiles, the grid connection capacity that you're having, whether it has limitations or any constraints, and also the CapEx and OpEx related to your renewable assets. So basically, Cosmos will take all these sets of inputs. It will optimize the revenues that the project can get, every day for the whole project duration, and for any configuration we will be implementing, and in the end we'll be able to pick which one is the most profitable, and maybe you will end up developing that project. So that was the first tool that we've used for this study. The second one will be the price forecast, because yes, without price forecast we won't be able to get the revenues that the project will be grasping for the next 15 years. And with that, we have used for the 4 countries our internally developed forecast. But what are the most fundamental assumptions that have been used in order to develop those forecasts? Well, basically, they rely on a set of inputs like the future electricity mix of each country considered within the study, like the thermal capacity that we will be having, the installed solar and wind capacity, as well as the commodity prices, gas, oil, coal, and CO2 tax, carbon tax, as it has a strong relation to the marginal cost of thermal power plants, and therefore will be impacting the prices on wholesale markets. From this second side, we also use, since we're talking about ancillary services, and we know how much they the business model of BESS system relies on them, we use in our inputs while developing price forecasts the storage deployment for each country, and most importantly, the market depth of each ancillary service available and eligible for storage, in order to anticipate BESS cannibalization and their impact in the future. So for the countries that we have studied during this presentation, we have for the BESS system considered all ancillary services that are open in each country and are eligible for storage participation. So for the Nordics, mainly Sweden, we have considered all FCR markets, FCRN, FCRD up and down, and FFR. And for Spain, for Germany and France, we have FCR through FCR Corporation. And for the secondary reserve, we have in the 4 countries AFR market for with both AFR reservation, AFR activation, and also MFRR with both reservation activation. And for the countries where the capacity market is open, we have considered that as well. And also of course the day ahead and the intraday market for the BESS system. So our forecasts are available in multiple European countries, more exactly 9, with plus the Baltics, the Baltic states, and soon we'll be having a release for Italy, and we will include afterwards Romania and Great Britain. So basically, these were the tools that have been used in order to run this study and give you the 2 key results, which are, as my colleague Florian has explained. First one is that BESS system remains more profitable when developed as standalone configuration than a hybrid project. But still, since grid connections are getting very hard to find in most of the European countries, in some cases we'll be kind of obliged to develop hybrid projects. In that case, maximizing the size of the BESS system will help cover some some fixed costs of the project, and therefore improving its overall profitability. So that's basically it, what we have planned for this webinar. And we will be looking forward to receive your questions. In any case, you can also check our LinkedIn page, where we publish a lot of insights regarding each of the markets that we have studied during this webinar. And again, thank you for your attention.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Amira, and thank you, Florian and Michael, for that great presentation. Many questions came in from the more than 1,000 people that registered to attend today. So thank you so much for your questions. As mentioned, we definitely won't have time to go through all of them and answer everyone, but we will do our best to see how many we can get through in the 20 minutes or so that we have. So I hope our panelists are ready. Yeah, so there are a few questions around duration or energy capacity of the battery storage systems considered. So thank you for those questions, and thank you, Gautier, for asking about that. Now, you did cover that a little bit in there, Florian, I think, and obviously you talked about how it was modeled with 2 and 3 hour duration battery storage, but could you just maybe give us a few words on that kind of relationship between, I guess, duration and profitability as opposed to kind of megawatt outputs to the grid?
Yes, thank you, Andy. So for the simulations, the duration that we've considered for the 4 countries were the following. So we took the results from our standalone simulations. We took the duration that gave us the most profitable configuration. So for Spain and Germany, these were 3 hour BESS, and for France and Sweden, these were 2 hour BESS systems. And we used them in our hybrid projects. So yes, of course, the duration of the battery will have an impact on the profitability of your project, because, well, a larger battery will cost you more money, but you can also grasp more revenues, especially on the energy market, and you can also maybe pre-qualify more on the ancillary services. So it's really a question of market conditions, pre-qualification rules that you have in the different countries. It's just a balance to find between adding an additional hour to your project to see if the revenues you're going to get, the additional revenues you're going to get will cover the additional costs of your system. Of course, adding a 4+ hour battery to your hybrid project won't make very much sense, because, well, you have grid connection competition, as we said, on the grid connection with the PV. So the battery cannot operate freely. It's a longer duration battery, so 4 hour plus, you're gonna have a hard time finding all the required energy to cycle the battery. So yeah, a very long battery, like 4 hour plus battery, won't make very much sense as it is nowadays with the current market conditions, because the additional revenues you're going to get won't be enough to cover the additional costs for a longer battery.
Sure. Anyone want to jump in on that as well?
No,
yeah, sure. Go ahead,
I just
Michael.
wanted to clarify, because okay, there's 100 questions, so obviously, well, we will, well, voilà. But there, I skimmed through and I saw a couple times. I just want to clarify. There may be been a misunderstanding regarding the IR table that Florian showed. Especially for Spain, people started, stressing out at this 19% IR. Please, I think Florian tried to explain that. I'll say it again, maybe in different words. We're not speaking in terms of IR. We're speaking in terms of augmentation of IR between hybrid or PV case or standalone storage case versus what you would have if you would have a PV only. As you saw in Florian's table, the first column on PV IR was 0%. the IRR of PV is not 0. It could be less, it could be more, but it doesn't really matter. We put it at 0, and then we look at the IRR of the hybrid, and we just make the difference. By the way, there were also some questions like, oh, we don't like your PV capex. Fine, doesn't really matter, because we're looking at the difference. A case, a hybrid case with a PV capex, and another hybrid case and a PV case also with a PV capex. You subtract it out, doesn't matter. The PV capex just goes away, right? So FYI. So what our angle is not to comment on the profitability of PV in given countries. Our angle is to comment on whichever of the 4 countries your IRR will increase if you add storage to the equation. And by the way, it's compared to a full merchant PV. All right. We don't discuss various PPAs that you may be in. And the merchant price that we're working on is based on our own price, our central scenario price forecast for each of the 4 countries. I'm just hitting the nail on the head, or whatever the word is. Just want to re-stress what Florian said, because from the questions I saw that there may have been some misunderstandings. Sorry, NDA. That was it.
No problem at all, Michael. No, it's good to have that cleared up. So yeah, I hope we're all now on the same page around that. That said, Michael, you might hate me for this next question then, in that case. It's kind of about the comparative profitability. So stop me if you've heard this one before, as the expression goes. So Valentin, actually, we had 3 questions that were kind of similar but phrased slightly differently. So if you could just humor me, and I'll go through these. So Valentin asks, what about the project finance debt to equity gearing of solar plus storage versus storage standalone projects? Don't solar plus storage projects get better gearing and so more cheap debt, which in turn improves financials compared to standalone BESS? And then similarly, Reda asks, what about the security of revenues between PV and BESS and BESS? And Salt asks, perhaps in the most straightforward way, let's say, or perhaps simplest one for me to say anyway, less profitable is okay if it means lower market risk. Is this the case? Is that something we're really looking at here, or are we kind of off topic with that?
No. So yes, no, yes, absolutely, but no. How about that answer? So it's central to all the simulations that were shown here. It's full merchant. So there was no discussion on, any guaranteed tolling agreement, PPA floor. That was been left out. The analysis made by Amira, Florian, and some other people in our team is all about just taking the merchant prices and try to make the most out of it. Period. And everything we're discussing here is unleveraged, right? We're just looking at the cost and the revenues, comparing it done. In terms of bankability, the bankability increases with the amount of guaranteed revenues, be it through a tolling agreement, through whatever it is that you have. And in our analysis, the level of guaranteed revenue is the most decisive factor in the final gearing ratio, hence the cost of debt, or etc. that you're facing. But right now, this is not that we had not approached that topic in this discussion. And I don't know, Amira and Florian, if you want to chip in, you can. But I think what we have seen so it depends on so many parameters. It depends on the country, but example of standalone storage, and you guys can either, you can probably replicate the same logic to a hybrid plant or even a PV plant. For standalone storage, when there's no tolling agreement, there's nothing, it's full merchant exposure, the gearing ratios we've seen are on the order of 50-50, like 50% debt, 50% equity. Whereas with decent and reasonable and sexy, whatever you want to call it, tolling agreements, but with some revenue fixed for up to 10 years, so guaranteed revenues, then the gearing ratio goes to 70-30. That is 70% debt, 30% equity. But wink, wink, caveat, it depends on so many parameters. I'm just trying to give average value. And if you guys want to comment, Florian and Amira, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's very like country dependent, country specific. We might even see less than 50-50 for full merchant standalone project. So it all really depends on the negotiations that you're going to have with your optimizer and the amount of guaranteed revenue, so tolling, floors, you name it. So yeah, of course, with PV projects, you're going to have, I don't know, PPA, so guaranteed revenues for all the lifetime of your project. You're going to find better gearing than BESS standalone project, which is like uncertain because of market risks and everything. So yeah, banks will only look at guaranteed revenues, which are made possible now with good optimizer route to market agreements.
Sure. Okay. And we had quite a few questions around the considerations between DC coupling and AC coupled hybrid projects. Is that something you guys have spent some time thinking about? And, DC coupling is obviously still, much rarer. I think it's fair to say than AC coupled. It's got advantages in terms of efficiencies, but also some complexities in, technical terms as well. Is that something you guys are looking at? And what's the long view on that, let's say?
Okay, so we can model that very easily in Cosmos, and we've done this many times. But I think essentially we see most of the players, regardless of the technical advantages in terms of efficiency and to some extent some capex limitation on DC coupling, we see very little amount of players actually going there. It's just because I guess it's just more difficult to implement. It's difficult to retrofit an existing PV plant. It's probably impossible to retrofit an existing PV plant by doing DC coupling. It's just much more simple to just have two inverters speaking. And yes, you lose a few percentage point a few basis points, if you wish, of efficiency. It's true, but in terms of ease of upgrade, ease of everything, is AC coupling seems to be the choice that the industry is making right these days. Yeah, just in terms of repowering, it's just more simple. So right now we can do both. I mean, we can simulate both. It's just very easy, but we've seen that, and the economics in theory are better with DC coupling because of this efficiency gains and whatnot. But the practical implementation of it is just very difficult, and most players don't, end up changing their mind, as we've seen.
For the economics, there's also the question of participation in ancillary services that might be uncertain with DC coupling. So this might be a problem as well. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we had a few questions about, and we were kind of discussing this, I think, a little bit in the lead up to this session. About, so in my coverage of the energy storage market, which is global, we see in the US a lot of what would be called hybrid resources. So that's projects that charge the battery storage directly from the solar installation. Conversely, when we look at the UK and we think about co-located projects, they are kind of more co-located rather than hybrid, so they'll share, perhaps the sites and the grid connection, but will be two assets that operate independently of each other. So there's a couple of questions around that, and again, so many good questions that it's hard to pick one, but I guess it's maybe fair to start with how you guys did your modeling. So Na asks, and thanks very much for your question, Na, says that asks, in your model for the configuration of hybrid PV and battery storage, can the battery buy electricity from the electricity market, or is the battery only allowed to feed into the grid and gets charged from PV generation? Is that, how does that kind of make a material difference in how people should think about these things?
Yes, it does both, and so the tool does both, and just makes the most optimal decision whenever just it's free to decide. So you actually can constrain the tool in doing whatever you want, but by default, we let it run its course and get its power from the PV without paying grid fees or buying from the grid when it's necessary. But in general, if you constrain, and we've seen this in Germany with the innovation tender, in general, if you constrain your your battery to not be able to consume from the grid, then the business case drops. It loses its interest, mostly because a lot of the ancillary services rely on having the battery charge and discharge and charge and discharge again to and from the grid. So if you constrain that out, then you sort of lose most of the value that the batteries bring in, at least in the first few years, which are the most profitable. So we can do both, but in general, we can work with whatever option. But in every country, Spain, Germany, where we try to model that on behalf of clients, to model the fact that you could not recharge from the grid, you ended up losing money left and right.
Excellent. And Amira, if I could ask, how does Cosmos kind of factor that in, and what are some of the observations you've had when kind of considering that sort of different configuration, I guess you could call it?
Yes, so basically, just to add on what Michael has just said, it's mainly country dependent. So you've mentioned earlier about the US. Well, it's basically, we've seen a lot of hybrid projects that at BESS in order to do some load shifting, because there's a lot of PPAs and there are a lot of government offers to get that service. Whereas in Europe, mostly, if there's an existing scheme that favors the use of BESS system in order to charge from the PV instead of the grid, we will see some projects developed and implemented for that. But they're only there because there's this scheme and there's this regulation that help that. But if we were to consider pure market opportunities, we will see that most of the projects, whether it's standalone or they're going to be co-located, we will see BESS that will be charging and having the ability to charge directly from the grid in order to provide the ancillary services that represent one of the major revenue stream for BESS system in most of the European countries. So basically in Cosmos, it's just like a button that you can click on and off in order to select whether the BESS system can charge from the grid or not. So for instance, in Germany, we're able to do both cases, a BESS system that has the grid access and can charge and discharge from the grid in order to provide ancillary services. But in the case of the innovation tender, as Michael has mentioned earlier, if the BESS is prevented from using the grid in order to charge and has the obligation to charge directly from the PV that is connected to, we will. It is something possible to do that. But again, if the BESS system is not allowed to charge from the grid, this will prevent the system from grasping the revenues from ancillary services. And since it's one of the main revenue streams, at least for the first years of the project, this will have a major impact on the overall profitability of the project.
Excellent. Thanks very much for your great answers, both. I think we're pretty much running out of time here. I did notice that a few people asked, so Benedek, thank you very much for your question, asked in which countries is the Cosmos tool available? But I think, Amira, you said it's about 30 countries. So we probably don't have time to run through a list of all of those, but certainly plenty of countries it's available for. And I'm sure Clean Horizon would be delighted to continue that conversation offline about that. The questions are still coming in, and there's some great ones. Should we just do one more, if that's okay?
Let's do one more, and I think we will receive the. I don't know. We always try and find a way to make sure the questions end up being answered. So
of course.
Later on, we'll answer them.
Brilliant. Okay, so Siddharth, thank you for your question. Asks about the consideration of negative pricing in your modeling. And if it is it dynamic and predictive, similar to energy arbitrage? So negative pricing and the impact on PV plus BESS and hybrid standalone storage. Anyone want to take that first?
Yes, sure. So
yeah.
basically the negative prices will be mostly related to the price forecast that we have used, and how Cosmos will look into that. It's basically in an economical point of view. If there's negative prices mainly on the day ahead, for instance, it's going to be more interesting to curtail the PV system, and the BESS will be charging directly from the day ahead with the negative prices that result to be extra revenues to the system. So it's the decision will be based on the most profitable economical aspect for both PV and the BESS system.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, folks. Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Much as I think we'd all love to keep going with these. So as Michael said, Clean Horizon will be in touch to everyone who asks questions. They will receive the questions and your email addresses, so you'll be able to have those conversations offline. But for now, I think it just remains for me to thank all of our speakers. Michael, thank you very much. Florian, thank you. And Amira, thank you so much for taking part and sharing your knowledge with the audience here. And that also leaves me to thank most of all the audience. So thank you so much for registering and tuning in. Thank you so much for the hard work you do for this fantastic industry. And yeah, as I said at the beginning, Europe is, poised and dare I say committed to a real renewable energy revolution, let's say. And so it's going to be really interesting to see, what the answers to some of these questions will look like towards 2030 even, or even closer than that. And yeah, so with that, I wish you all a good afternoon and look forward to